Hey guys, I'm Kyle, the design director here at Obsessed Garage, and today we're going to be talking about compressed air systems and a lot of the common questions that we get when we're dealing with people in garage design or people are reaching out for help. Just like when Matt is working on a car, detailing, polishing, replacing an exhaust or something like that, remember that this is just the way that we do it. We don't always do everything exactly by the book, the way that Prevost would want us to or FIAC would want us to, but it's worked really well in all of the installs that we've done and all of the designs that we've completed and with all of our clients and everything. So today we're not going to be talking about dry ice or dry ice systems or compressed air for that. That's really a whole other animal. We're really just going to be focusing on main uses for like detailing and tools and stuff like that. So let's jump into it. So when I'm on calls with clients, really one of the first things I ask regarding compressed air is, what are you going to be using it for? A lot of guys, they immediately think that, hey, I need, a big compressor, I want a bunch of reels, and I want to do all this stuff, and I want to have Prevost all over the place. And then when we really get down to it, they realize, oh, shoot, I'm just going to be, filling tires, or I'm going to be, also, polishing, and I'm going to be cleaning out pads and stuff like that, or cleaning interiors, and I want to be able to dust and that sort of thing. So this is really, the first question that we always ask to really get the process started, because this leads the way then for everything else with, selecting your compressor, figuring out how many air reels you need, figuring out how much Prevost you're going to need, and, how big of a system to really do, and how much CFM and pressure and that sort of thing. So answering what you're going to be using compressed air for really will help determine the answer for the next question, which is, what compressor do I get? And, if you're going to be doing, small stuff like filling tires, blowing out polishing pads, blowing out interiors, stuff like that, you probably don't need, something real big. And a Werther P50 or PC120 would be a great fit. You can still hook those up with, a couple air reels if you want to, but those are going to be the right capacity for those smaller tasks and be super quiet. If you're a detail shop and you're still doing those basic tasks, but you need to be able to support more users and more reels over a larger area, the 5.5 horsepower SCS from FIAC is probably a good choice, or maybe one of the smaller Jennies, like a 2 or 3 horsepower. Something in like the 30 to 60 gallon range would probably be just fine. But if you're, you have a really large shop, or you're using a lot of pneumatic polishers and pneumatic tools all the time, it might make sense to bump up to something a little bit heavier duty, something like, Matt's old W5B 80 gallon Jenny compressor, or the larger version of this, the 7.5 horsepower FIAC 958 SCS silent piston. Probably be a little bit better choice for a larger shop, or if you're doing more heavy duty type stuff. The new Werther NS 3/300 is their new vertical machine that replaces the FIAC Silver 3. Is a great unit that can service, larger shops and be super quiet. So this, the silent pistons are pretty quiet at like 69 decibels, I think. But that Werther is same as the old FIAC, 59 decibels, super quiet. You can do some basic, polishers and pneumatics on that, but if you're doing it for a lot of different users, it's probably not going to be enough. But to service a big shop with, blowing out pads and doing interiors and stuff, it's great for that. If you step up to a Jenny or a FIAC silent piston or the Werther NS or something like that, these typically have a female NPT outlet with no regulator, no filters or anything like that. So you really want to be able to do a Prevost Alto 3 with gauge, or the sub-micron filter like we have here on the wall. That'll help filter the air, since there's no filtered air coming out of the machine, but then it also provides the regulator that you're going to want to have, so that you can make sure that you have all of your air at the correct pressure when it's coming out and feeding the rest of your system. Drying is another big aspect of this. We honestly don't always use the dryer here at OG. We have very humidity controlled air and air conditioned and all of that. So if you have a space that's humidity controlled, air conditioned or heated, and you're not really doing anything too intense, like we're pretty much filling tires and blowing out polishing pads, occasional pneumatic polisher use, you probably can get away without a dryer, especially if you live in a really dry climate. But it's always a good thing to have, especially if you're doing an SCS machine, because you can spec it to have the dryer built in, which is really cool. If you're doing like the Werther NS that doesn't have filters or a dryer built in or anything like that, you can do the T-Dry, which will have some filters, and that'll help condition the air and dry it. I would still probably set that up with an Alto 3 after that, so that you have the regulator aspect, as well as a little bit more filtration to really help clean the air. But that's pretty much all you need to worry about with air dryers. If you're in an environment where you don't have a conditioned space, or if you're running a lot of air tools, then it's probably something that you're going to want to spec with any air compressor setup that you do, especially the larger ones. So the next question we get a lot, especially when it comes to electrical and stuff like that, is where do I put my compressor? Now, if you're doing a smaller Werther, we've been doing a lot of those setups lately, you have some options, because this just runs on a simple 120 volt, I think 15 amp circuit, so it's not really too power hungry, so you probably have an outlet somewhere in your garage where you can put it. And you can put it on the floor, you can put it on top of a cabinet. We could even spec it and you can put it inside of a cabinet. Now, doing that would require a little DIY for running power and getting your air out to a Prevost line and stuff like that, but it's definitely doable. We spec that out a lot when we're doing designs for folks. For the larger compressors, fortunately, unless you're going with like a Jenny, which is still an awesome compressor, they're just loud, you can kind of put these wherever you want. We have this SCS silent piston in the main space here. When it kicks on, yeah, it's a little loud, but like Matt can still keep going on a video or whatever he's doing, and it's not going to shake the building or be so overbearing. So wherever you have 220 volt access, if you have that already in your garage or shop, that's a great place for it. Just put it right over there. Typically in a corner, I like to put them in like kind of this front area where you have the garage door and this little alcove that usually doesn't get used a lot is a good spot to put them. You can put them in an attic or in like a machine shop or machine room or something like that. And with Prevost, we can get access to air, however we really need to. So it can be in another room if you want it, but fortunately with how quiet these things are, especially the Werther NS, you can just have it in the middle of the room if you wanted to, and it'd be totally fine. The Jenny compressors, since those are more of a traditional piston style compressor, belt driven, they're pretty loud. So that I would want to have in a machine room or somewhere separate that's not going to just shake the building and disrupt yourself or make everybody jump or whatever. I remember when we had that over next door, and when we were all crammed in that little space, and Matt would be working on a car or polishing or whatever, and sitting away typing, answering some emails, and that thing kicks on, and man, it like shakes the whole building. So just keep that in mind, that you're probably going to want to have a separate place for a Jenny. But the rest of these, you can kind of just put them wherever you have power and wherever it's a convenient spot in your garage for it. So another common question we get is, how many reels do I do and where do I put them? Typically, we're probably doing 2 to 4 reels, in each garage. Even sometimes bigger shops, only get that many. It kind of just depends on your uses and what you're going to be doing with it, what the layout is. Matt a lot of times likes to do 4 reels around a car. So like at the Atlanta garage, we did, a reel at every single corner of the car around a lift. That way you have access all the time. Or if you have a bunch of people, maybe doing pneumatic polishing or something like that, you always have access to air. This setup's a little funky because it's an angle and just the way that the cabinet array worked out. We only really did 2 reels, but they give you access to either side of the vehicle. When we're designing a space, a lot of times what we'll do is put an air reel near, one corner of the car and then the opposing corner of the car. That way you have access to, say, the front and right side of the car and then the left and back side of the car. And then you, of course, would want to do another reel somewhere else in the garage, maybe by the garage door or something like that, so that you can access outside. Remember, these are 50-foot hose reels, so you do have access to be able to service something that's a pretty long way away. But be careful where you position things and plan it out so that you're not having to cross over a car or run a hose through a congested area. So being able to position at different ends of the building is a lot of times a really good idea. Also, along with doing a reel, you could plan for some drops and just have like a wall manifold like we have over by the Hunter machine. And that will be pretty handy for plugging in like a spiral hose or just maybe some other piece of equipment that might need to have air supplied to it. So we're getting pretty far into this now and really planning out your entire compressed air system from start to finish as we're walking through these questions. The next one we get is, how do I connect my compressor to the Prevost piping? And if you're doing a small Werther compressor, this is probably going to be what starts the run. And how you're going to connect to it is going to be with a whip line like this. Now, obviously, this isn't like a compressor setup, but this is going to show you a pretty good idea of what you can expect. So the wall manifold can be mounted at whatever height you want to do it. Probably maybe a little lower than this would be good if you have like a compressor on the ground, like the small Werther P50 or something like that. And with that, you're going to want to have a coupler on the outlet. I think it's a 1/4 inch female NPT threaded coupler that you're going to want to install on the outlet of the compressor. Whether you do, European high flow or industrial, that's up to you in the system that you're into. And then you're going to want to have a whip hose, probably 2, 3, 4 feet long, something like that. We offer, I think, a couple different lengths, and you can do, our nice blue hose. From Continental, or you could do a stainless hose if you want to get fancy with it. They're pretty good. But you're going to want to have a plug on either end of that hose that's going to connect to the compressor and then connect to your wall manifold. And this will really be the main shutoff valve for your entire system if you're doing one of those small compressors. So that way you can turn the air on, shut the air off, service and change things as needed, for whatever you need to do. And with the larger compressors like the FIAC SCS silent piston or the Werther NS or a Jenny compressor, kind of like I was talking about earlier with them having the female NPT outlet, it's a little bit more complicated to get the process started of, okay, how do I get from the compressor to then having Prevost on my wall? And that's where we're going to use most of the time the 1/2 inch braided line. And that'll connect directly to the back of the compressor. You may need to go find like a street elbow, something that's 1/2 inch to 1/2 inch on the back so that you can not have the hose, coming out and hitting the wall or something like that. But you're going to want to have that go into one of the Prevost 1/2 inch valves. And then go into your Alto 3 or your 3-stage submicron filter system like we have on the wall here. From there, you're just going to connect one of the various Prevost fittings that has 1/2 inch male NPT on the end and then pipe fitting on the other end, and that will really kind of just start your run. You could do a straight fitting like this, you could do a T of some kind, or you could do a 90 if you wanted it to just immediately go straight up to start your run. If you were doing an air dryer, it's going to be pretty much the same process. That's going to have an MPT outlet. You're going to connect your air hose to that into an Alto 3 or so on and so forth to connect up to the piping. All right, next stop is to actually plan out your piping and really figure out, all right, where do I need to run all my piping? Where are my hose reels? How do I get it there in the most efficient way possible? And pretty much all of your hose reels are going to be either on the ceiling or on the wall. So we're going to have to figure out how to navigate to get over there and actually get air to them. From this starting point, like we just talked about, you're pretty much always going to want to go up since your reels are going to be up higher. Most of the time you're going to want to go straight up to the ceiling and then distribute out from there. You're probably going to do a 90 like we have here, or maybe even an equal T to go left and right if you're doing like a loop or something like that. And then you really want to go as direct as possible. Now, this ceiling that we have in here and the way that we had to run the piping in this building is pretty complex, just because we have a lot of HVAC, we have beams and purlins and stuff like that. So you really have to be conscious of where you're going to be running your pipe and what kind of obstacles you're going to have to go around. You can see that, we went along the ceiling up here and then had to do some 90s and special stuff to come over to this wall on this side, go around the post, and then be able to come down to these wall manifolds. You really want to keep everything as level as possible. Everything all on the same plane if you can. So if you have a building where it makes sense to suspend your piping down with all thread like we did in the middle section, when we're traversing the length of the ceiling, that can be really helpful. If you have to have some kind of slope, have a manifold at the end point, because the manifolds have a release valve at the bottom so that you can drain the line and that sort of thing. So that's super helpful if you're going to have any kind of moisture buildup. Just kind of use some trial and error. One way to do it, if you can buy the parts fast enough and get it installed fast enough within that 30-day return window, just buy a bunch of stuff, buy a bunch of unions, buy a bunch of 90s and T's and stuff like that. And you're probably going to have to use a little bit of trial and error to figure out exactly what you're going to need for that space. But this does get pretty complicated. I think you can do it yourself, but if you need some help, just reach out to us, via email or something. We can help you, kind of plan out that part of the system. All right, we're on the home stretch now. You've picked out your compressor, you've figured out what you're doing with your compressed air, and you've planned out your run of piping and all that stuff, and you have your reel locations. Now is the easy part, and that's pretty much connecting the Prevost lines to your air reels. We don't really get a lot of questions on this, but I want to throw it in anyway because it's something that we preface a lot just to make sure that everybody understands what's going on. But basically, you're going to end your Prevost line in some kind of NPT fitting. Because we had some parts left over, this is a female threaded MPT fitting, which means that we had to use a male to male threaded fitting to then connect to the valve. You can just spec that out with a male threaded fitting on the end of the Prevost and then connect your valve right to it. But you're going to want to use that same female to female 1/2 inch Prevost valve for the connection. That way you can shut off this reel if you need to change out the reel or redo anything on it. And then you're going to connect your whip hose to that valve. You can either build your own whip hose with barbs and ear clamps and rubber connectors, or you can buy one of the 2-foot whip hoses that we have and connect directly to that valve, and then the other end connects directly into the hose reel. All right, guys, I just threw a lot of information at you, but these are really most of the common questions that we get in design when we're planning out people's air systems for garages and shops. There's a lot of nuance to this, but hopefully, we got you most of the way there, I think. We're going to be doing some more videos on this and really going into some of the designs that we're doing and how we're setting up different examples and different systems for compressed air with varying types of hose reel setups and compressor setups and stuff like that. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, design@obsessedgarage.com. We can either just answer some simple questions for you, or we can design an entire elaborate, Prevost system for you if you want to. But thanks again for watching. We'll catch you guys next time.